There's a city beneath the city. Most people have no idea it exists. They walk above it every single day, buying coffee, hailing cabs, staring at their phones, completely unaware that just meters below their feet, engineers have carved out one of the most complex, expensive, and technically demanding underground systems ever constructed by human hands. We're talking about a subway line so difficult to build that it nearly broke the city that ordered it. So expensive that its cost per kilometer shattered every record in modern transit history. So deeply buried that its stations sit lower underground than some buildings are tall above the street. This is the story of how a city decided to do the impossible, and very nearly failed trying.
I'm standing at the entrance of one of the deepest subway stations in this entire metropolitan region. And the moment you start descending crewing, whether it's by escalator, elevator, or staircase, aircate, you feel it.
The air changes. The noise of the city disappears.
And you realize slowly that you are going somewhere that took thousands of people, decades of planning.
To understand why this subway line became the most expensive ever built, you have to understand the problem it was trying to solve. And the problem, put simply, was this. The city had run out of space. Not just a little bit of space. Completely, catastrophically, almost comically out of space. By the late 20th century, major metropolitan areas across the globe were experiencing the same terrifying phenomenon. Urban populations were doubling, tripling, exploding outward and inward simultaneously. The streets couldn't handle the cars. The existing rail lines couldn't handle the passengers. The buses were gridlocked. The air was thick with exhaust and frustration. And in city after city, engineers and planners were delivering the same grim verdict. We need to go underground. We need to go deep. And we need to start immediately. But here's the thing about going underground in a modern city. It sounds straightforward. Dig a tunnel, build a station, run trains. Done. Except it is almost never that simple. Because beneath these cities, beneath the sidewalks and the sewers and the ancient water mains, lies an invisible world of unimaginable complexity. Fiber optic cables, gas lines, electrical conduits, century-old brick drainage channels, archaeological ruins, buried rivers, and most terrifyingly of all, the foundations of some of the tallest, heaviest buildings ever constructed by mankind. The engineers who were asked to build this line weren't just asked to build subway. They were asked to thread a needle through a city's entire underground body without hitting a single vital organ.
Behind me right now is what the engineers call a ground freezing zone. It sounds almost science fiction, but it's real. During construction, they had to literally freeze the soil around certain tunnel sections, pump liquid nitrogen through pipes embedded in. The temperature they were working with was roughly negative 196 degrees Celsius, and they had to maintain that freeze for months. In an active urban environment, while the city above kept moving.
Let's go back to the beginning, because every megaproject has a moment, a single political decision, a single vote, a single handshake that sets everything in motion and makes everything that comes after inevitable. This line was no different. The proposal had been circulating for years, decades even. Engineers had drawn up preliminary sketches. Planners had conducted surveys. Traffic modeling had been run and rerun until the numbers became almost surreal. The conclusion was always the same. A new deep-bore subway line was not just necessary. It was existentially necessary. Without it, the city's transportation network, already groaning under the weight of millions of daily commuters, would effectively collapse within a generation. But here's where it gets interesting, because every time the proposal made it to the desk of the politicians who would have to sign off on it, it died. Not because people thought it was a bad idea. Everyone agreed it was a good idea. It died because of one thing and one thing only, the price tag. The preliminary cost estimates came in and immediately triggered a political crisis. The numbers were so large, so staggering, that several city officials initially assumed they were looking at a typo. They weren't. They were looking at a price tag that, when adjusted and finalized, would eventually make this single stretch of urban rail the most expensive linear infrastructure project per kilometer in the recorded history of human engineering. Wait until you hear this. At its peak cost estimates, certain sections of this line were being priced at over $2.5 billion per kilometer. Not per mile, per kilometer. To put that in perspective, for the same price per kilometer, you could theoretically build an entirely new highway bridge across a major harbor, then build it again, twice.
I've been talking to some of the senior engineers on this project, and one of them said something to me that I keep thinking about. He said, every single decision we made underground had to account for the fact that we were working inside a city that never stopped moving. The city didn't pause for us. Not once. And when you're standing down here, looking at these tunnel walls, which are reinforced with systems that to design came.
The political battle that preceded construction was, by any measure, extraordinary. It stretched across multiple election cycles, multiple mayoral administrations, and several near-death experiences for the project itself. Advocates pushed hard. Opposition pushed back harder. Budget hawks demanded cuts. Engineers fought back against every cut because they knew that when you're working this deep underground in a dense urban environment, cutting corners doesn't save money. It creates catastrophes. And then came the environmental review. This is where it gets truly complicated, because building a deep underground railway through the heart of a densely populated city means intersecting with every environmental system that exists beneath it. Groundwater tables, subsurface contamination from old industrial sites, protected archaeological zones where any digging risked uncovering artifacts that would legally halt construction for months or years. Migratory patterns of underground aquifers that nobody had ever fully mapped. The environmental impact assessments ran to tens of thousands of pages. The review process alone consumed years and cost tens of millions of dollars. But eventually, after political battles that would fill their own documentary, the project was approved. The budget was signed, the contracts were awarded, and the real work began. Here's the crazy part. The moment construction started, engineers discovered that the ground beneath this city was almost nothing like what the surveys had suggested. Almost nothing.
You have to understand what it means to tunnel through geology you don't fully understand. I spoke with one of the lead geotechnical engineers too, this woman who has spent 30 years working on underground projects across 4 different continents. And she told me that when they started getting core samples back from the first deep bore test shafts, there were soil formations down there that they had simply not anticipated. Ancient riverbeds, pockets of pressurized water, layers of decomposed rock that behaved like wet sand under pressure. She said, and I'm quoting her directly, "We had to re-engineer sections of our tunneling plan in real time, underground, while the machines were already moving."
The control room for this line is one of the most sophisticated urban rail operations centers ever built. From a single facility, located at a secure, undisclosed location, operators can monitor every single train on the network simultaneously, tracking their positions to within meters in real time using a communications-based train control system that allows trains to operate at headways. The gaps between consecutive trains, far tighter than would ever be possible under traditional signaling. This CBTC system, as is known in the industry, was itself a major engineering challenge to implement on this project because installing it required developing entirely new communication infrastructure within the tunnel environment, a radio frequency environment of extraordinary complexity, given the depth, the tunnel geometry, and the proximity of other communication systems operating in the city above. And then there is the power system. Running a subway this deep underground requires enormous quantities of electrical power, not just to run the trains, but to operate the ventilation systems, the lighting, the escalators and elevators, the platform screen doors, the station management systems, the communications networks, and the emergency systems. The power distribution infrastructure for this line, the substations, the third rail or overhead systems, the redundancy networks designed to ensure that no single electrical failure can take down more than a limited section of a line, represents an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars that almost never enters any public conversation about the project.
I want to tell you about the opening day of this incredibly advanced public transit system. Because after everything again, all the delays, all the cost overruns, all the political battles, all the engineering crises, so after all of that, there was a morning when the gates opened and ordinary people walked down into these stations for the first time. And from everything I've been told by people who were there, engineers, project managers, construction workers who had spent years of their lives.
The opening of this line was, by any measure, a moment of genuine civic emotion. Years of visible disruption. The construction sites, the lane closures, the dust and noise and frustration that had been part of daily life in the affected neighborhoods had ended. And in their place was something extraordinary. Something permanent. Something that would outlast everyone who built it by generations. Passengers who rode the line on that first day reported something that doesn't show up in any engineering specification, but that engineers secretly care about deeply: the experience of the thing. The smoothness of the ride, a product of the precision with which the tunnel alignment was built and the sophistication of the track system. The quality of the air on the platforms, a product of the ventilation engineering that took years to perfect. The visual impression of the stations, those high ceilings, those light wells, that sense of being somewhere that matters. And the speed. The sheer speed with which this line moved people from one side of the city to another. Journeys that had previously taken 45 minutes in gridlocked surface traffic, now taking 12. The impact on the city wasn't just logistical, it was economic. Property values along the corridor shifted. New development clustered around the stations. Businesses that had struggled to attract workers from distant neighborhoods suddenly found themselves accessible to talent pools they hadn't been able to reach. The economic modeling done in the years following the opening by independent researchers with no stake in the project's political success consistently found that the long-term economic benefit to the metropolitan area substantially exceeded the extraordinary cost of building the line. Which is not to say the cost wasn't real. It was brutally real. It is still being paid off. The financial instruments used to fund this project will not be retired for decades. Future generations of city residents will, in a very real sense, be paying for this subway line long after many of the engineers who designed and built it have passed away. Whether that is a triumph of long-term urban thinking or an act of fiscal irresponsibility is a debate that has not ended and probably never will.
There's something I keep coming back to, standing down here. We talk about this project in terms of dollars and meters and geological formations and political crises. But beneath all of that tat, literally beneath it, in these tunnels' pow, is something harder to quantify. The decision to build something like this is a decision to believe that a city has a future worth investing in. That's not an engineering calculation. That's a statement of faith.
The most expensive subway line in the world didn't just move people from point A to point B. It proved, at extraordinary cost, after extraordinary difficulty, what is still possible. What human engineering, driven by genuine need and genuine political will, can accomplish even in the most constrained, complicated, dangerous urban environment imaginable. The tunnels are there now. Permanent. The stations are full of light and air and the movement of people. The trains run. And somewhere beneath the city, in the deep geology that fought the engineers every step of the way, in the waterlogged ground and the fractured rock and the pressurized aquifers, there is a system of tunnels and stations and rails and power systems and ventilation shafts and monitoring sensors and emergency systems that will, if maintained and operated with care, still be moving people through this city long after everyone alive today is gone. That is what engineering at its greatest is. Not just solving today's problem, building something that serves tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow,